The following podcast is a Country Mompreneur production.
Welcome to She Can and She Will. I'm Marianne, also known as the Country Mompreneur, and I'm joined by my co-host, Disa McAllister. We are moms, work-from-home experts, and we love helping women take control of their lives and see all the possibilities. On this show, you will learn from us as well as other women who kick butt in their lives and want to help you do the same. So sit back and get ready for some fun. Well, welcome back to She Can and She Will. I'm being joined today by Rebecca Peterson, and she is a brand strategist. Rebecca, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I still feel a little like, brand strategist. That sounds very fancy, doesn't it?
That's very fancy. So tell me about you and how you got to be a brand strategist.
Yeah. So I've always had a love for design and kind of this balance of I love making things organized and I love making things pretty. In my mind, those are kind of the same thing, right? If something is functional, then it looks good.
Yes.
In college, I started studying like graphic design. I did advertising, and the world in my industry, you could say, was to push everybody towards an advertising agency.
Right.
And that just was not my thing. It never resonated with me. I didn't love working with, a bunch of high budget, high kind of rolling things. And so I started looking for like in-house advertising departments. That was kind of where I wanted to be. And I did that for several years. And then when I became a mom, I was still working full time in an office. And if you've kind of done that juggle, you know that it's really difficult. And so when I got pregnant with my second and we ended up moving from Utah to Texas, I thought, this is my chance to do something different. And I didn't know what that would be at the time, right? So I was thinking like, maybe I'll do like a contract position for another corporation, or I had been working in nonprofit for a few years. And so I was like, maybe I'll do nonprofit stuff. Anyway, and I kind of just scrambled around trying to find the right thing. And what I started doing, because a lot of my background was in web design, I started doing websites. So that's really where I started. I did websites. I would do, smaller projects. And then I had something that I offered at first called a website glow up. And this was kind of my first step into doing something, what I call like a productized service, where I, instead of saying, you hire me to do whatever you want, I was saying, this is the service that I offer and you can pay me to deliver that for you. And, so it was $250 for a website glow up, and it was like everything included.
Wow. So you were like really undervaluing.
Oh yeah. I was way undercharging, and I knew I was undercharging a little bit, right? Like I was like, this will just be good because I need to get clients. And I don't think I realized how much I was undercharging.
Yeah.
I actually started finishing these websites, and I'm spending so much time.
Like, I made $2 an hour on this job.
Yes. I literally remember like clocking it out, and I'm looking at my Google spreadsheet, and I tell my husband, I'm like, I have made less than $5 an hour.
Yeah.
I remember being so upset about that. I was like, I would be better off getting a job at Chick-fil-A than doing what I'm doing. And I was doing an incredible job, right? Like I was delivering amazing websites. Anyway, so I fast forward, I start charging more and I start signing these bigger clients, because one thing that you should know about me is I am not somebody that can do things halfway. So doing smaller projects, doing templates, like that kind of stuff works for other designers, works for other entrepreneurs. It just never worked for me. I cannot under deliver. I have to give like the whole enchilada. And so what started happening is somebody would hire me to do a website. And in the process, I would discover that they didn't have a brand. And so I would basically give them a brand in addition to the website.
Yes.
And I realized that before you can have a website, you have to have a brand. And in order to have a successful brand, you have to have a strategy behind it. And it was kind of this like magical moment, because I would do these designs for people, right? Like I'm creating the logo, I'm choosing the color palette, all of these things. And I'm realizing that like, I'm just kind of guessing. I'm just kind of making decisions based on what I like, what they tell me they like. It wasn't terribly intentional. And I intentionally thought, if I'm going to do this, I am going to give people the best brands they've ever had. I'm going to give them something that will last not just this year or for this phase of their business, but something that will truly last 20 to 30 years, right? Like that's the goal. And so I started learning everything that I could about creating a strategic brand or brand strategy. And there's a bunch of different definitions of brand strategy, right? So in some people's minds, I guess, brand strategy is the process of looking at all of the businesses in your industry and saying, okay, there's already a really expensive business and there's already a really cheap business and there's already one that does like full service and one that does templates. So I'm going to find the gap and fill it. Right. And, that works very well. That works well for a lot of businesses. But what I found is my sweet spot, my passion is not so much worrying about where the gap is in a specific industry, but working with the CEO specifically and saying, what is it that you want to offer? What is it that is your special sauce, your unique gift, your magic? Let's take that and turn that into a brand. And I really have found that when we do this strategic process of uncovering that and then like finding the right words and the right designs to communicate that like special sauce, it doesn't matter how many other businesses there are doing the same thing. It doesn't matter if you're in a super saturated market. I put air quotes around that because I'm like, I don't really even believe in a super saturated market.
Yeah.
That is what allows you to succeed despite all of that and really attract the people who want to work with you to you, whether that's, clients for a client-based business or customers for an e-commerce business or whatever it is. So that's how I kind of frame my brand strategy. And, there's so many different ways that you can apply it. But for me, it's like I said, I want things to be beautiful, but I really want them to be functional as well. And in my mind, if those two things can happen together, that's like chef's kiss, perfect for me. And that's what I give all my clients. So that's kind of how it started, and that's where I am now.
Yes. So now your clients, when you're sitting them down and getting them started, what are some of the confusing things that they see, and what are some of the fears that they face when it comes to branding themselves? Because I know some people, I was working with one lady and I asked her, can you send me over your brand guidelines? Mm-hmm. She was having me work on her social media and she's like, well, we just sort of use whatever. I was like, well, that doesn't work. That's not going to be very good. So what are some of the ways that you get people on board with the importance even of branding?
Yes. I think that there's some kind of like pre-work that you have to do before you're really ready for a brand. So the first thing that I like my clients to have is a clear deliverable. And that doesn't mean that they're offering the same package every time. But if I'm working with, let's say like a life coach, and sometimes they're working with moms who want to improve their relationship with kids, and sometimes they're working with husbands and wives, what I want them to do is to kind of make a decision on what is it that they want to focus on. And I do not require my clients to like super hard niche down. That's not my view of what branding is. But a clear deliverable of some kind where they say, this is the transformation that I want to be providing, or this is the package that I want to be selling. And we can pivot, we can adjust, but usually there's a clear decision there that has to happen. The other thing that is really important for my clients to have kind of in order to build their brand is who they are selling to. And we talk a lot about your ideal client in branding because I really believe that your brand is about you and your gifts and your talents and skills and bringing that to the people that they're best suited for. So I want to know who is it that you want to sell to and who is it that can afford your services? Who is it that's ready to buy them? And kind of in what capacity are we speaking to those people? So a lot of my clients, for example, are moms, right? But when I am speaking or marketing to my clients, I'm not really speaking to them as moms. I'm speaking to them as business owners. They happen to be moms, but that's not the focus that I give it.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of come to a consensus. And that's something that I help my clients do, right? So as long as they have a clear deliverable and a good idea of who they want to sell it to, I would say they're in a good spot for branding. One of the things that people are really worried about is they're worried about being put in a box, right? And especially people like me who have so many ideas and so many talents, and you could really do anything and be successful, right? They're like, I don't want you to put me in this box and feel constricted. And I really think that a good brand strategist should be able to take the things that you are good at and the way that you deliver them, and it will expand your options rather than constricting them. So let me give you a concrete example. I had a client who was an executive coach. So she would work with C-suite executives in like management training. And she was really passionate about that. She loved doing that, but she also loved working with basically moms who didn't have a job, but were in leadership positions of some kind, right? She didn't even have that language for it. She was just like, I also really love working with moms. Sometimes they're like a PTA president. Sometimes they volunteer at their church. Sometimes they are like a realtor on the side. So we're talking through all these things, right? And she's like, I don't want to choose one or the other. I don't want to have to choose. I don't want to be forced into one. I don't want you to have to narrow it down kind of thing. And so we talked about it. And what happens is I do what's called a strategy session with my clients. And I ask them all these questions about who it is that they want to work with. And then I ask, what do they have in common? How do we speak to all of these groups? And over time, as I'm listening to my clients, there will be kind of a common thread that emerges. And so for this client, it was leadership, right? It wasn't so much what kind of position they had, whether they were a CEO or whether they were a PTA president, but these were people in leadership positions who wanted to be good leaders. They were willing to invest in management training, in leadership skills, in speaking, so that they could be more effective leaders. So that became kind of the narrative for her brand. So everything was about, I think the tagline that we came up with was the business of you, cultivating your leadership skills, right? And so that became what we used, and everything was about you become the leader and you are cultivating a community rather than followers of people who can work with you and you're serving them. So you have to be able to kind of step back and dissect what it is that you want. But I don't think that you have to put yourself in a box. And the reason that I think it's really helpful is to have, the reason that I think it's helpful to have kind of a third party or a brand strategist like me sit down with you is because there's this saying I love that says it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what happens in our business. And it happens to me too, right? Like I have so many ideas, but it's really hard for me to get a clear picture of what's going on when I'm in the middle of it. And so if you can have somebody who's willing to sit with you and read that label and who knows the right questions, right? Mm-hmm. You can come up with something that does not put you in a box, but feels really, really expansive and feels like, yes, this captures me and it gives me room to grow. So if you're feeling concerned about that, I would say you need to find the right person who can work you through that.
And I feel like having your brand strategy in place should be something that you address early on in your business development. It shouldn't be something that, we'll do that later. It should be something that you really address early on.
Yeah, there are some branding experts who will say, I only work with people who've been in business for 2 years or, all these different things. And in my experience, the earlier you do it, the better. It's always harder to rebrand further down the road. Now, if you're still in the phase, like I was talking about, where you're not exactly sure what you are selling or who you're selling it to, it's okay to take some time and experiment and figure that out. But what I have found with my own clients is there's not a dollar number that they hit or a certain number of months in business, but at some point there will be kind of a settling where they feel like, this is the way that I want to move forward. And when that's settling, that's when you should act. I think the longer that you wait after that, the longer you're putting off success, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really think I know brand strategy can be kind of this abstract thing, right? Like, if I just talk about who I want to work with, But to me, it's really about defining that, like having it written down and having it said in a way that works for you. So I say like you have internal statements and you have external statements, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you actually say in your marketing that captures what we've, figured out in your brand strategy? So don't be afraid of like, what is it that I'm going to get? You're going to get tangible assets that help you build your brand.
And it helps with your advertising as well as when you build a team, it helps even internally with your team building as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've basically worked with a client and said, we got to step back because you don't know what you're doing. Yeah. And you offering new products or growing a team or raising your prices is not going to help your business grow unless we have this foundational element of knowing really who you are and what you are trying to sell and why it matters, right? Like this is kind of my gut check. When I'm talking to a potential client, I'll say, okay, so tell me what your brand is all about. Like, give me the short version. And if they don't have an answer that is easy and comes quickly and says exactly what they want to say, that's a pretty good indicator that we have a little bit of work to do. So if you can't say right off the bat, oh, my brand is about creating beauty and order for coaches and consultants who want to grow their business by attracting their dream clients, right? Like that's my brand. I can say that easily. That sums up exactly what I want to say about my business. If you don't have that, it's like, okay, let's figure that out. And then everything else will fall into place. And I think people would be surprised too by how much their visuals are affected by the strategy. So many times I see business owners who are trying to look a certain way. And I'm like, that's not who you are. Like they're trying to be like the luxury 5-star vibe. And I'm like, you're like a super down to earth, live in rural Texas, coaching your clients. Like you don't need a brand like that feels much more warm and personable and like round and fun. And it's just so you need somebody to help you work through that. Doing it by is really, really tricky unless you're a designer.
So you have a 5-step framework for building a successful personal brand. Tell me more.
Yes. Okay. So when I am working with a client, we go through this framework because it's kind of, if you think of it like a pyramid, right? Mm-hmm. So we start at the very bottom with just visibility, or what I really like to call it is discoverability. Okay. Because there's an element of marketing, I'm sure that you know this, where you are getting visible, right? You're putting forth ads, you are creating content. Maybe you're being a guest on a podcast, right? And those are things to help you get visible. And really what I'm doing with branding isn't a lot to do with visibility so much as discoverability. So do you have somewhere that you exist online where people can find you? And it doesn't matter where it is, if it's a website or an Instagram or a podcast, but you have to have somewhere that you live where people can find you. And so we start with that. Where do you live? Where do you want to be? Where are people discovering you? And then the next layer of that framework is what we spend the bulk of our time on. And that is value and meaning. And this is like the heart of everything that I do, because I believe that a brand is what gives your business more value. And it's not just about increasing the perceived value, right? Like, oh, I'm going to look really expensive so people will think I'm expensive. It's about actually increasing the value by understanding the meaning of what you're selling. Okay. So let me give you an example, because I know this can be hard to understand.
Yeah.
Let's say that you are like a fine artist. You sell oil portraits. Okay. What you sell, the face value of what you're selling is a painting. It's canvas, it's frame, it's oil, paint. That's basically it, right? I don't know what the cost of those things would be. Maybe you're buying really nice materials and it's like $100, right? Okay. But what does a custom oil portrait mean? What is the deeper value of that product? Okay. Well, it could be a family heirloom. It could capture the essence of someone's spirit beyond anyone's kind of photograph that they could take. It's something that allows you to, it could be a beautiful gift, connect with future generations. connect with yourself. Okay. All of these things now, the value has gone from oil and canvas to a priceless work of art, right? And this is the exact same process that I go through with all my clients. So I ask them, okay, what are you selling? Okay. What does that mean? What does it mean if somebody has a parenting coach? Okay. Oh, so you teach them the 4 functions of behavior, blah, blah, blah. No. That's the face value. That's like what they get. What does it mean to them? Oh, it means that they can be the kind of mom they've always wanted to be. It means that they get to reclaim the relationship they have with their kids. It means they get to enjoy even the monotonous parts of motherhood. All of a sudden, that meaning gives what you're selling so much more value. But if we don't define that, if we can't really articulate what that is, you're not going to be able to sell it at the price point that feels good to you. So that's what value and meaning is, right? And we take all of that, we put that into the next layer, which is your identity. And this is where we get into like, okay, so how do we say it? How do we explain it? What does it look like? Okay. So if I am an artist and I'm selling this oil portrait and I really want to capture that this is a masterpiece, that it's a creative expression, that it's a family heirloom, what am I going to do to say that? Well, I'm not going to have just like plain black and white. I'm probably not even just going to have like red, yellow, and blue, right? I'm going to have deep, rich greens and a vibrant purple and maybe flecks of gold. And maybe you have this bright, like azure blue that represents the sparkle in everybody's eyes. Like you bring that meaning into the design of it. And the cool thing is, I get so excited about this. The cool thing is that even though people don't cognitively know that that's what's going on, they feel it, right? So when they see your brand, they're not like, oh, she used flecks of gold because that represents luxury and excellence. Mm-hmm. But they subconsciously recognize that the way that this is presented to them means something more than just, I design paintings, right? I create portraits. So you do that with everything. So we do that with color. We do that with your logo. We do that with, we call it typography, which is just like the fonts that you use, because every curve, every serif tells something to your ideal client about the meaning that you are offering. So I even go so far, I do imagery. I help my clients plan and execute photo shoots for their business because it's everything that your image captures. And we want that to be, I call it integrity. Some people call it alignment, but I want the visual part of it to be in integrity with the strategy and the meaning part of it. So that's the identity, right? Okay. So you see how it's like building on. So instead of just like, oh yeah, this is my brand, this is what I sell, all of a sudden you have something that is not just deeply personal to you, but also really resonates with your ideal clients. Mm-hmm. I really believe that we are hungry for connection. We really want people to speak to not just our problems, but like our core desires. And so the more that we can do that, the more successful we will be in making sales, of course, but also the more successful we'll be in creating stronger connections with the people we want to serve. Because my clients, and you may feel the same way, they're not just out there to make money, right? If we just wanted to make money, we could all go to Chick-fil-A. We could get high-paying CEO. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in creating connections with people who want what I have to offer. I'm really interested in mastering my own craft so that I can serve people. And so when we do that through a brand, it allows us to then get the byproduct of success. So we have these layers, right? Okay. So you have visibility, you have value and meaning, and then you have identity. And then we have, application and expression. These are kind of the same thing because this is how you actually market your business. Okay. So once you know who you are, what you're trying to say, right? There's a messaging component in there, but then it's like, what do I do with that? Okay. So this is, how do I name my offers? How do I price things? Right. There's kind of an idea that a higher price is always better. Not always true. You know, let's look back at value and the identity and the visibility and figure out what it really is that would be right for you. We're going to talk more about imagery. So what images do we use specifically for these offers? What channels are appropriate for you? So if your home base, right, that visibility layer where you're discovered is a really great SEO optimized blog, maybe the channel that you use is a podcast and you use that to drive people to the blog. And so then we work on refining your message and your identity so that you can bring people there, right? So there's kind of this natural progression of what you do with the value to communicate it, both in the way that it looks and where you put it. Okay. And then we have this, imagine this pyramid and the very tip of the pyramid. Okay. So once we figured out what channels we're using, where we're putting things, tip of the pyramid is the X factor. Okay. And this is really where I think a brand strategist comes into play, because all of these things you've kind of figured out, right? You know who you are, you know what you're selling, you know how it should look, but then you're like, what do I do to turn this product or program or service or whatever it is from something that people buy into an actual movement, right? How do I generate that buzz? What do I do? And so this is going to look different for every single business and probably for every single offer. But I think what you really have to focus on is, who am I trying to sell this to, this specific offer? And what is the unique meaning that they will get from it? So if this is an oil portrait, to continue this example, and I'm selling this to, here's an example that I love because this is something that really happens. People that buy oil portraits for donors at a university.
Okay.
Right. Hang them in the hallways. That's going to be a very different problem and solution. And you're going to present that in a very different way than if you're just selling it to somebody who's buying it for their home. Right.
Right.
So you're going to say, okay, what's the X factor? How do I do this in a unique way? How do I do this in a way that captures attention? Maybe you create an online platform that's a digital gallery of oil portraits, right? Maybe you do some kind of like guerrilla marketing where you're taking these portraits and you're actually putting them in physical office spaces, right? Maybe you're going to art museums and you're putting up little QR codes for your own art. Maybe you're hanging your own art on the wall, but you're doing something that speaks to who it is that you're trying to sell to and also speaks to the value and the meaning, right? Going back to that core that you're trying to create. And this is really where you get to be creative. And this is really where I think kind of conventional marketing falls short.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously so many great things that you can do, right? You can run Facebook ads, you can get on podcasts, all of that kind of stuff. But I really think that the sky is the limit. I've had clients who have made digital magazines. I've had clients who have sent gift boxes. Like there's no rules. And so right. I think if you can really say like, if this didn't have to be a website or it didn't have to be a print ad, like what would it be that would best capture what it is that I'm selling and how can I create that? Right. And sometimes that means putting a little bit of money into it. And sometimes it just means having really powerful conversations, right?
Uh-huh.
Sometimes it's just offering an oil portrait session for free,
yep.
right? Like, but there are creative things that we can do that allow you to grow your brand beyond just the standard answers of like, oh, we'll pay money for advertising or do SEO or these kinds of things that I'm just like, ugh, boring.
Yes, I agree. I love it.
So that's the 5-step framework.
Yes. So now if someone's listening, they want to work with you, we're going to put your links in the bio, but yes. What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
So I am always on Instagram. My home base is Instagram. It's at Rebecca Peterson Studio. And you can find me there. And I'm always happy to chat. My website and stuff will be in there too. So I'm everywhere. But if you want to have a good conversation about what we can really do for your brand, find me on Instagram and we'll chat it up.
So we end with one final question. What is one tip you would give people to inspire them today to get motivated on whatever journey it is that they're on?
Ooh, that's a very good question. Okay. one tip that I would give them. This might sound, I don't know if this sounds contrary, but write everything down. Become one of those people who has a notebook at all times. That's who I am. I capture every idea, every thought, quotes that I love, and bring that to your brand strategist, because those are the magic pieces of you that we can turn into a really powerful brand. So that's my insight for you.
Awesome. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for having this wonderful conversation. I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you for listening. She Can and She Will is a Country Mompreneur production. Audio mix by Marianne. Research by Disa McAllister. To learn more about this and other Country Mompreneur productions, visit thecountrymompreneur.com.